afternoon, committee members and members of the public joining us for this meeting. I'm Megan Marshall. I'm the executive officer here at the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, and I have the pleasure of opening our meeting today. Thank you for your commitment in joining our efforts to end and prevent homelessness in California, and for being with us at a 2-hour meeting on what is, I think, a beautiful day for most of California. But a few reminders before we begin. This is in fact a 2-hour meeting, and we'll do our best to keep to this time frame, but there's a possibility we may go over just a bit. This meeting is subject to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, and it requires that it be open and accessible to members of the public, that the agenda is posted 10 days in advance of each meeting. A quorum must be met to hold the meeting, and that members not meet in private to discuss committee matters of the meeting, and also that we make a public comment available. Before we begin, I want to go over our agenda for this afternoon. We'll begin with a call to order, tribal land acknowledgement, and roll call. Consent calendar, we're backed up on approvals of our consent calendar, so quite a bit to go through. Advisory committee co-chair opening comments, a few updates from myself. Very exciting 2 items. One is an action item. It's the fiscal year 26-27 months of awareness adoption. That we'll be hearing from co-chair Alex Visosky on legislation overview for pending bills in California state government. And then we will close out with general public comments, final remarks, and adjournment from our co-chairs. There will be an opportunity for general public comment near the end, as I mentioned. We'll allow for a maximum of 3 minutes per comment, and we welcome all public comments and feedback. However, due to the structure of the public meeting we're in, we will likely not be able to respond. But for this reason, if you have any specific questions that you'd like to be answered, please email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov, and we'll have that email address for you in the chat. All right, so with that, the Advisory Committee of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness is hereby called to order on this day, May 6, 2026 at 2:15 p.m. Next slide, please. And at this time, I will read the tribal land acknowledgement. Our wonderful tribal liaison, Vivila Blossoming Bear, is away at a conference, but with us in spirit as always. But we wish to acknowledge that Sacramento is the unceded homeland of the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, the Nisenan people, the Patwin Wintun people, and members of the Wilton Rancheria tribe who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. We extend our gratitude to the ancestors of all California Native American tribes and their descendants, as we recognize that wherever we are joining from in our virtual community, we are all on California Native American land. And with that, I will turn it over to Claire Bannerman, which, by the way, welcome back, Claire. For committee members, as a reminder, Claire had 1 meeting with you all before she went on maternity leave. We are very happy to have her back, and I thank Giselle Sanchez for her stepping in and supporting Claire's role while she was enjoying her brand new beautiful baby girl. So with that, welcome back, Claire, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Megan. All right, so this attendance roll call is for the committee, and we need a majority of members or a quorum to officially meet and hold this meeting. Committee members, after I call your name, please say present or here. If you are a designee for a member, you may state your name after the committee member's name is called. However, this does not count towards quorum. Apologies if I mispronounce any names. I've got Samaj Algier. I believe I saw Samaj earlier. Let's see. Samaj, I see you're here. Oh. Okay, we've got you in the chat. Thank you. Songai Armstead,
Present.
Lauren Cardin,
I'm here.
Joseph James,
Hi, I'm his appointed designee for this meeting, so doesn't go towards the quorum, but I'm Nicole Sager. I'm here for the York Tribe.
thank you. Dashelle Kendrick, Kevin Klon, Graham Naus,
Justin Garrett, I'm here for Graham for CSAC.
thank you. James McKee, Mary Maldonado,
Here.
Alejandro Martinez, I believe I saw Alejandro. Nope. Okay. Christina Mills, Lisa O'Connell, Tunisia Owens,
Present.
thank you. Carolina Reed, Alex Sanchez,
Present.
Alicia Sebastian,
Howdy.
thank you. Adrian Shilton,
Hi, present.
thank you. Carla Thomas,
Present.
thank you. Alex Bitsotsky, oh, did we lose Alex? Javon Wilkes
Present.
and Roxanne Wilson.
Present.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum. Next slide, please. All right. So I will move us on to the next agenda item. This is the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for regular, non-controversial items that need to be approved by the committee via a vote. We have 3 items on this consent calendar. It will be the adoption of the meeting summaries for February 4th, 2026, November 5th, 2025, and August 6th, 2025. Next slide. Before proceeding, since this is an action item that will result in a vote, we will now open it up for public comment. Please keep comments to the items on the consent calendar only. If your public comment is not related to the consent calendar, there will be time for general public comment at the end of this meeting. If you are connected through Zoom, please select the raised hand icon in the meeting window on your computer. And for those joining by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. Once I call on you to speak, you'll be instructed to unmute yourself and you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will just check for raised hands. Okay. There are no comments from the public. Are there any comments from committee members?
Hi, apologies, Alex Visotsky. I'm here. I got kicked off my internet in the middle of roll call.
No worries. Thanks, Alex. I see no comments from committee members. Would anyone like to motion to approve the summaries?
Motion.
Thanks, Siobhan. Do we have a second?
Roxanne Wilson, I'll second.
Thank you, Roxanne. All right, I will now call roll for a vote. We have a motion to adopt. And when I say your name, please say aye or yes. You may also abstain or vote no. Samaj Algier. Songai Armstead.
Aye.
Thank you. Lauren Cardin.
Yes.
Joseph James.
Abstain.
Thank you. Jashelle Kendrick. Kevin Klon. Graham Naus. James McKee. Mary Maldonado.
Yes.
Alejandro Martinez. Christina Mills. Lisa O'Connell. Tunisia Owens.
Yes.
Thank you. Carolina Reed. Alex Sanchez. Alicia Sebastian.
Yes, thank you.
Adrian Shilton.
Yes, approve.
Thank you. Carla Thomas.
Abstain.
Thank you. Alex Vitsotsky.
Yes.
Thank you. Javon Wilkes.
Aye.
Thank you. And Roxanne Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. And I just need to check to see if we have enough. Unfortunately, we do not have enough members, so it does not pass. So we will take this to the next meeting for the consent calendar. I will now pass it over to Alex to provide the advisory committee opening chair comments.
Thanks so much, Claire, for getting us rolling today. Thank you, committee members, for joining us here today. I'll just be brief to kind of kick us off. It feels like we're in a really odd place in California right now on homelessness, where we have sort of mounting evidence that a lot of what we're doing and have planned for and funded over the last couple of years is starting to work, and make a real impact. In the HAP program, we just saw the latest data tell us that over 100,000 people have been placed into permanent housing thanks to HAP. We're seeing communities across the state starting to see actual decreases in their homeless counts, both in the 2025 counts and then preliminary numbers that we've heard about for 2026. We've seen really strong work on youth homelessness, and strong decreases in youth homelessness, I think thanks in part to that set aside that's in HAP. And we've seen some recognition of that progress. For example, in the state Senate's budget proposal, they've released a plan that has robust funding for HAP, funding for affordable housing production, rejecting key cuts to programs like IHSS that vulnerable people rely on. But it remains to be seen what we're going to see from the assembly side, and it remains to be seen how much that progress is going to be recognized in the May revise released by the administration next week. So that progress that I've mentioned, it feels more precarious than ever before, even as we have this kind of increasing evidence that some of the things we're doing are working. At the federal level, even as we've seen some important wins on the FY25 continuum of care funding, and HUD is finally starting to move towards renewing funding that's expiring in 2026. We know that they're signaling that their next round of homeless funding, which the NOFA for that has to be released by June 1st, is going to have many of the same policy priorities that they were pursuing in late 2025, policy priorities that led to 22 states, including California, suing them, as well as my organization, the National Alliance. Priorities like moving money out of existing permanent housing. And at the state level, we don't know that the success that we've seen in HAP, whether that's going to continue to be funded. Funding that was allocated, meanwhile, funding that was allocated almost 2 years ago, HAP 6, has still not reached many communities. And I think if you've been listening to the conversation in the legislature, it often feels like it's lacking recognition of what has worked well sometimes. It's lacking recognition sometimes of that federal context. It's lacking recognition of the extent to which money and resources really make a big, big difference in addressing homelessness around the state. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pieces of legislation that are out there and kind of give us some flavor of the tenor of that conversation. And so that's why we expect an assembly budget proposal that might be more tempered. We expect a governor's May revise that's going to be more tempered than what we've seen from the Senate. So my charge to everybody is, yes, let's use this space to talk about what's not working, hammer out where we need changes. Let's give that feedback to the administration. But we need to take our message out to our legislators and out to our communities and to our partners and share some of the amazing work that is happening in communities. We need folks to know that we are making progress so that we can sustain that progress. Thanks so much.
And I know Roxanne is torn between a few meetings, so we're just happy that she's here with us. And thank you, Alex, for those opening comments. If we can move on to executive officer updates, thank you. So quite a bit to mention today. Just as a reminder for the committee members, one of our major areas of focus has and continues to be implementation of our statewide 2025-2027 action plan to prevent and end homelessness. And as a reminder, the council adopted ambitious North Star goals intended to move us forward towards system-wide improvements. And so I think we all can agree how challenging any improvement or any progress is when there are significant threats to existing historic funding sources, as Alex mentioned. So we will continue to provide data updates in our quarterly council meetings. We're happy to integrate those into the advisory committee meetings as well. But our role of Cal ICH staff continues to be around coordination with our council member departments, who are the primary funders of our state's investments that are reflected in the action plan. We know there's significant public attention. There'll continue to be that level of attention on state's homelessness investments, and are eagerly awaiting the governor's May revise. So really important opportunity today to hear from Alex on pending pieces of legislation that impacts that work, including some additional requirements for data. And we are continuing continuing our work related to the homeless data integration system, which is the statewide collection from our 44 continuums of cares homeless management information system, or HMIS, and continue to focus those efforts around two critical pieces of legislation. Those are AB 977 and AB 799. As a reminder, 977, yes, the numbers are unfortunately close, and they are but related pieces of legislation, but the numbers do not make it easy to just roll off the tongue. But 977 requires that all state investments in homelessness be entered into locally managed homeless management information system, or HMIS. And 799 requires that Cal ICH make publicly available dashboards that includes fiscal and program outcome information. And we responded to an audit from 2024 that we would absolutely have those dashboards live by June 1st, 2027, and we are on track to make that goal. But this will be the first single location where, whether you are just a Californian interested in the state's investments, or you are an academic, whomever is interested in knowing where the state dollars are going and what outcomes they are producing, this dashboard will be that first opportunity for us to showcase that and answer those longstanding questions. So with that, though, really important continued collaboration with our continuums of care, who are responsible for HMIS locally. So we're continuing work on dashboard development, as I mentioned, the reporting tools as well, and we'll be showcasing some drafts to this group as well as to our council in the next several meetings. So we're excited for that opportunity. But at the same time, we continue to remind our stakeholders and all folks invested in this work that homelessness data is complex. Different programs serve different populations, operate under different statutory requirements, and measure outcomes differently. And building a statewide accountability framework that's transparent and accurate takes time in coordination with groups like our advisory committee, but we are, as I said, making steady progress. But because this is such a complex system of care, I think is the best way to describe it, really looking forward to having the advisory committee help us frame the dashboard language and companion materials in a way that makes sense for the majority of Californians. So very happy to have this group. We're also fast approaching July 1st, when Cal ICH will officially transition into its own department within the new California Housing and Homelessness Agency, or CHHA. Many of you know that Cal ICH has just been this entity within state government couched under the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, which is an odd collection of state entities and departments. Includes horse racing, cannabis, housing and homelessness, of course, civil rights department. But July 1, that conglomerate agency will be splitting into two, and Cal ICH will be established as an official department under the California Housing and Homelessness Agency. So this is a very significant milestone. It's an administrative operation, I would say. But it is incredibly symbolic to our work. It really is going to help cement all of our efforts as a long-term statewide priority, particularly at a moment when our state is also preparing for a transition to the next governor's administration. So homelessness did not emerge overnight, and it's not going to be solved overnight. Didn't occur in one administration, won't be solved in one. So creating durable infrastructure for statewide coordination and partnership matters very deeply. So internally, our team is actively preparing for that transition through our operational planning, staffing alignment, development of our coordination structures. For the advisory committee, all that means is you'll get a whole new, a Rolodex or contacts for Cal ICH staff. For our email addresses primarily, we will no longer be at bcsh.ca.gov, we'll be at calich.ca.gov, but we'll definitely share all those out with you when we get a little bit closer to that date. But we're also continuing our partnership work tied to encampment coordination and resolution efforts throughout the state. And that partnership is primarily with our council member department of Housing and Community Development. But also includes leaders from our big cities, our counties, and our continuums of care. So I want to continue to emphasize an important distinction that we often discuss just for the good of this group. Abatement is not resolution. Abatement is sometimes critical for infrastructure work that needs to happen. Sometimes a power line is down or a bridge is in urgent need of repair. And sometimes that results in the moving of folks who are in an adjacent encampment. That is not encampment resolution. Those lasting outcomes require the coordination for outreach, shelter, housing pathways, and are only possible through strong formal partnerships and sustained engagement. So just want to be clear, there's been a lot of coverage in the news and social media and want to make that distinction for this group. When we, Cal ICH, talk about addressing encampments, we are talking about encampment resolutions, but want to recognize that there are state departments as well as local efforts that sometimes will result in abatement. So in addition to that, we remain deeply committed to our equity-centered work, including our tribal homelessness initiatives. I had the opportunity to attend the annual Tribal Nations Summit just in April. I've been in this position now for 3 years, and that is still remains to be my one of my favorite state events that I'm able to attend. And you hear from, tribal chairpersons and very interesting panel discussions with state leadership in response to questions from tribal nations in California. And so our tribal liaison, who I mentioned earlier, Vivila Blossom and Bear, did a tremendous amount of work in trying to stand up a tribal advisory board. We are not the only entity, of course, who is standing up or wanted to stand up a tribal advisory board. Unfortunately, we didn't receive very many applications for that particular body within Cal ICH, but we will be connecting with Department of Housing and Community Development, who did receive quite a bit of interest, so that we can ensure that we're also incorporating discussions on homelessness policy in that particular body. So we know we ask a lot of community in general. We ask a lot of you all. This is not your full-time job, certainly. So we are very aware of the amount of time and effort and energy that we're asking our partners to support state operations. So more to come on our tribal engagements at the next meeting. But finally, before I close out, I just want to offer a special thank you to our other body supports, our Lived Experience Advisory Board, which is, as a reminder for this group, is 11 persons up and down California with lived experience of homelessness. And we have 2 seats on this advisory committee for what we refer to as the LEAD supports, and those positions rotate on a 6-month schedule. And so we've had the great fortune of having Mary Maldonado and Alex Sanchez participate on this advisory committee as the LEAD supports. But this is their final committee meeting before we introduce the 2 new supports at our August advisory committee meeting. So Mary and Alex, just thank you for all of your partnership, your compassion, but I would say almost more importantly, your passion for this space and for all that you've done to support these important conversations. So thank you both again. And with that, I will wrap up my comments. I'll just give one opportunity. We'll have some hopefully towards the end, but I know we're trying to rush through now a few things. Any questions from the advisory committee before we move on? All right. Hearing and seeing then, we can move on to
I
the
think
next
we have a
item.
hand. Sorry,
Oh,
I think we have a hand
thanks,
up.
Alex. No, thank you.
Of course. And I don't want to keep us because I know there's so much to get through and it's not totally a question, but again, Alicia Sebastian with the California Coalition for Rural Housing. We work really closely with a lot of the folks here, specifically in serving our tribal communities and rural communities. So I want to just say thank you so much for bringing so many of the, not just like the specific legislative issues that are coming up, but also the greater context that we're operating in. And thanks also to Alex in your opening remarks, kind of saying like, this is an odd time to be in California doing this. And so CCRH, we're really tracking those bills like 1556 and 1708, because those are make or break it for the communities in which we are working. So in many of our tribal and rural communities, these are the types of things that will make or solve for these issues. And in a lot of our communities, we have an opportunity to solve for homelessness in a way that a lot of our larger counterparts don't. And so we always say that legislation has a disproportionate impact on some of these rural spaces. And so I think it's really important that we are engaging and helping our constituents and those folks who look to us to understand the impact. I'm not saying we're lobbying. I'm not saying we're lobbying with dollars that we can't. I know all about this. but I'm allowed to. So just wanted to flag that and say thank you. And then also speaking towards the issue of not having quite the folks we needed or wanted or hoped for the advisory committee for tribal community folks here. Again, Megan, you've been such a champion for this throughout your career, but especially in your role here. But we've had a lot of issues at the Coalition for Rural Housing as we've been trying to help folks understand some of the reorg or the new Housing Finance Agency or what some of this stuff is. And we've had a lot of issues in helping to get our tribal partners through that. So I would be really excited to see if there's some ways we can chat or connect about the fact that sometimes there's just too much happening and we're all asking the same 3 people. And I bet if we help to kind of sort it out, we could probably get a few other folks, or we could more officially bridge some of the work between the Tribal Advisory Committee here. So I know that was less of a question. It was a lot of things, but I really just wanted to say thank you. And I'm really grateful that we were able to have the conversation and that you brought so much forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We are, deeply committed to continuing that work. Budget and legislation aside, we have really embraced and adopted and incorporated no native homeless on native land, and is really only possible because we are so fortunate to have such a dedicated tribal representative in Davila. So it's not changing for us whether or not we had, 1 application for the Tribal Advisory Board. We had 2, but whether or not it was 1 or 2 or, 101, 102, we are committed to the work. And instead of asking more from our tribal communities, we will just instead reframe it like, where can we fit ourselves in, just so that we, can support the homelessness policy portion of those conversations. So, thanks, Alicia. And I can't see hands, but any other questions before we move on? Seeing none, we will move on to the next agenda item. All right, and this is an action item. I'm hoping that we have quorum to take that action. If not, we will put it on the next agenda, but we felt that this was a very this may feel like a fluff piece to some, but I want to assure you it is not. This is something that has been sort of a struggle for myself since I've been in this position. And it's, really doing that interagency work around messaging and, engagement, public engagement, social media campaigns, et cetera. And really feel this is a good time for us to commit ourselves to adopting months of awareness, and wanted to have first this conversation with the advisory committee and, as I mentioned, hopefully a vote on which months of awareness Cal ICH and its council member departments and its advisory committee will acknowledge and put forth, our investment in staff resources, making sure that we are getting our message out. Unfortunately, I will say the vast majority of Californians still don't know who Cal ICH is. And sometimes that's a good thing, but we are at a sort of a point now where we can't afford not to acknowledge, what is possible through our council, through our advisory committee, our lived experience advisory board. And as I said, sort of this just seems like the lowest hanging fruit opportunity for us to be able to do that message alignment. So next slide, please. All right, so the purpose of this action item is to align our public awareness efforts with California's homelessness data, elevating education disparities and solutions impacting communities across the state. We are hoping to, you'll see in the next few slides, we've made a 12-month calendar of recommendations of months of acknowledgement that we're hoping for you all to adopt. And then we will bring to our council in June's meeting, but have used data to inform those recommendations we're in the month of May, so I will use May as the example. It's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. May is a lot of things. There's a lot of things nationally that we could choose, but Cal ICH has used our data sources to inform which selections we wanted to recommend to the advisory committee. And Carla Thomas, who's with us here today, got a call from a strange lady named Megan Marshall probably about a year ago because her organization, EPIC, is a statewide entity that seeks to empower Pacific Islander communities and is one of a very small handful of organizations of its type. But we recognize in our data the overrepresentation of the Pacific Islander community in unsheltered homelessness. But we had no representation for that community on our advisory committee previously. So just wanted to highlight an example of how we use data to help inform the recommendations of which months of acknowledgement we were hoping for the advisory committee to adopt. Next slide, please. I won't go over each one of these bullet points, but I'll hit the highlights. This matters. I think all of us I don't think any of us would question why messaging matters and why it's important, especially in these very uncertain, uncomfortable, confusing times, to lift up our investments that are working, the areas where we have opportunity for growth, but in particular, identify those disparities. Highlight our blemishes, call those to the carpet in a data-informed way, sort of calls to action for those folks who are implementing programs. But again, using data to inform that work so that we are based in facts and not feelings when it comes to messaging. But we're hoping to incorporate those months of observances across all of our social media platforms, which again, as a humble reminder to advisory committee members, if you don't follow Cal ICH on social media, please do, because chances are we follow you, but appreciate that. So sort of the technical incorporation would be, we're going to be tagging our council member departments, asking them to repost, asking you all to do the same, as well as our lived experience advisory board. But we understand that a quarterly meeting doesn't invite the same level of partnership that more frequent engagement does, and this is just another opportunity for us to do that. Next slide, please. All right, I've really hit these points, so we'll go to the next slide. All right, and we will literally go month by month, but July, and for the remainder of the presentation for this portion, I'm not going to talk about the why it fits. Instead, I think most of this is self-explanatory, but if an advisory committee member does have a question regarding why a certain recommendation was made, we'd be happy to have that discussion once I'm done presenting the 12-month calendar. So July, we're hoping to have the advisory committee adopt Disability Pride Month. August as back to school month. That is not an official national holiday, but is a very important time for a lot of our school-age children and families, as well as teachers and aides and lunchroom ladies, if we still have those. I'm actually sure we do. Folks who are waiting to go back to school, but who perhaps are also unsure of if they're going to have a bed to sleep in that night. So last August, we did a really successful campaign with Cal ICH staff and a few of our council member departments to do a backpack collection for our local children's home, our local children's receiving home, but also for a family shelter. Also in the month of August is Overdose Awareness Day on the 31st, which segues into September as National Recovery Month, October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, World Homelessness Day as the 10th of October. Next slide, please. November as Native American Heritage Month and Homeless Youth Awareness Month. December as Winter Safety and Shelter Awareness. And again, that one is not a national observance, but is a time in California where a lot of our communities open up additional shelter capacity, sometimes referred to as winter shelter or winter sanctuary, depending. And it's just really an opportunity for us to remind folks as they're going into celebrating holidays with friends and family that we have Californians who are outside in very, in sometimes inclement weather, but sometimes dangerous weather. And then looking to acknowledge January as Poverty in America Awareness Month, and really wanted to just highlight for this one a focus on prevention and economic instability that is doesn't impact just folks who are already experiencing homelessness. It impacts everybody. And then February is Black History Month. And next slide, please. March as Women's History Month, April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, with a week in there, snuck in there as Public Health Week. There is an incredible linkage between the work of our homeless continuum of care, system of care rather, and the work of public health, specifically around prevention and intervention methodologies. May as Mental Health Awareness Month and Asian American Pacific Islander, and I'm sorry, it says Awareness Month, which is a great thing, but it is Heritage Month is the official nomenclature there. June as Pride Month, and also as Elder Abuse Awareness Month. Next slide, please. So we can go back to July. So I guess that's slide 14. Thank you. All right. So with that, I will take a pause, a drink of water, if there are any questions from the advisory committee before we open it up for public comment and potentially a vote. Adrienne?
Hi everyone. Thank you for going through all of this, and I don't have a question, just wanted to offer support to be, celebrating these months along with council members and all of you. And I was also wondering, because we do this at the Alliance as well, I've got my background up for Mental Health Awareness Month. That's one example. It's also Foster Care Awareness Month in May. But we also accompany like a toolkit for each of the months with like stats and stuff. Is that like, in terms of like us posting on our socials and talking about this more publicly, like, do you plan to also release more information or templates that we can use?
Yes. And so we're trying to put, once the months have been adopted, we can then start planning on toolkit development. If it's something that, as I mentioned, December as being Winter Shelter and Safety Month is not something that exists elsewhere as far as I know. And so our team would develop something unique and specific to California, but I'll use Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's a national recognition. If there are toolkits from reputable national organizations that we can incorporate into the releases, we will. But yes, our intention is to give our advisory committee members, as well as our council and lead members, a quarterly packet. So you would have, if we had this ready to go now, we would give you in the month of May, for the next 3 months, here are all of the things that we'll be messaging and would ask for your support and sharing out as well. That's general. And then specifically, you all have areas of oversight and expertise in. And so for the Alliance, obviously, we'd be like, let's partner for Back to School Month and all the, Child Abuse Prevention Month, doing those more deeper connections is also something that we're excited to start doing. Any other questions from advisory committee members?
So
Well,
Megan,
Claire, yes.
we are not able to take action today at this time, unfortunately.
Okay. I appreciate that. We'll tell the advisory committee if there's no opposition to what's been shared with you all. This is not something that technically requires you all to take action. It is something that we wanted to incorporate and to ensure there were no strong feelings in opposition. We'll present this to the council in next month, in the month of June, for their awareness. But I'll have to check in with our. Oh, I see a hand.
Yeah, it's Alicia again with Coalition for Rural Housing. Would it be appropriate? I get that we can't have a quorum, but to document some way the approval or support or like thumbs up, we like this, beyond obviously Adrian's sharing some actual thoughts about that. So like, can I motion to can I motion to document or collect a roll call for the folks who have cheered, yay, we understand, we don't need you to explain why it fits, we get it, we're here for it, let's do it?
I mean, we love anything for the official record, and
right?
So
I'm happy to put my name in my. Yeah, tell me how.
I think that would be helpful, Alicia. I think what you're asking for is just a show of hands of support for this, so that Cal ICH staff can document for the official record that of the members in attendance, there was none in opposition to moving forward with this social media plan.
Yes.
Great. And maybe we'll do the other way around. If there is opposition, please raise your virtual hand. If no opposition, appreciate your all support. All right, seeing no virtual hands.
Sounds like unanimous support from present members.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we will, Cal ICH staff will document for the official record that of those in attendance, there was unanimous support for moving forward with this framework. So I appreciate that. All right, since Claire, I think we can probably move on to the next agenda item. That wasn't an official action, but appreciate the solidarity. Before I pass it over to Alex for this next item, I just want to do the official introduction to discuss proposed state legislation. These are bills that are currently in process. You will see the sort of the template for each of these slides will tell you where in the process these bills are. I want to acknowledge that this is not the entirety of bills that could impact our work in housing or homelessness, but these are the bills that will, if passed, could likely result in significant change one way or the other for our efforts. But really want to know that this is intended to provide informational updates on pending homelessness-related legislation, references to advocacy resources, policy materials, position of advisory committee members, and or external organizations on proposed legislation are the personal and professional views of individual members or their organization, and any positions or views discussed does not imply endorsement by Cal ICH, but this is as Alex and as others have echoed, this is a very weird time in California, lots happening, and this body should be aware of bills that are very closely connected to our work. So with that, I will say thank you, Alex, for facilitating this item on today's agenda, and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, so I don't work for Cal ICH, so I can just talk all my smack in this item. No, actually, I wear a hat every day kind of as an advocate as well. But just for the purposes of ensuring I'm giving information of run through of bills. I'll hold back from kind of sharing what the Alliance's position is and ways we've engaged on these bills. But I'm more than happy to share more about that in case anyone's interested during the discussion portion. And I want to give a quick run through of a handful of bills that the Cal ICH staff asked me to highlight. I think there's a few bills that are not on here that are not directly related to homelessness, but do have big impacts on homelessness. So I would urge people to take a look at bills related to like bench warrants, for example. There's a bill right now to ban bench warrants, AB 2122, which would have tremendously beneficial impacts, right, for folks experiencing homelessness that often find themselves jailed because of bench warrants that they might not have even known they had. There's bills related to making it easier to tow people's vehicles and dismantle people's vehicles. Again, not directly related to homelessness, but huge impacts potentially on many folks living outside, living in their vehicles. So not going to talk as much about those bills today, but happy to talk offline. I really wanted to use this time to give a sense of the conversation by way of a handful of the bills out there. The big themes in the legislature continue to be wanting to talk more about accountability and data and reporting. There's a little bit of focus on homelessness prevention, and some of our members are kind of sponsoring bills that are related to that, and I'm sure can opine more on that. And there's a lot of efforts to really lift up shelter programs as well. More money for shelter, more data for shelter, more modes of shelter. So I'll cover a few bills and then would love to just move into a discussion portion where we can talk about what is like our feedback for the state and what do we want Cal ICH staff to be chewing on as they sort of give feedback on these bills, because they do have a role in the legislature and in giving feedback to authors. B, what do we feel like is missing? Like where do we feel like the conversation is not where it should be? And how can we advise our friends at Cal ICH to help drive the conversation in the directions that it should go? So next slide, please. I'm going to start with AB 1556 from Assemblymember Haney, which is sponsored by the Bay Area Council, also sponsored by Mayor Daniel Lurie of San Francisco. This is, I think, Mr. Haney's fourth kind of crack at this bill. It's a bill seeking to define recovery housing and ensure that recovery housing is eligible to receive state homelessness funding, so that we have more options for people who in their recovery want an abstinence-based environment and that can be supportive of their recovery. I think there's some valid questions now that Cal ICH has released guidance on recovery housing of the extent to which this bill is entirely necessary statutorily. But the hope of the authors and of the sponsors is that if done right, the bill can provide further clarity on how locals can do recovery housing and use state funding for it, funding programs that haven't traditionally funded recovery housing like HAP. It's worth noting that I think there are some DHCS programs that are already allowing homelessness funding to go to these types of uses. We do want to highlight in the drawbacks, one big concern that I've seen from advocates is that, normally under Housing First, relapse and substance use cannot be a cause for eviction. Unless there's other lease violations present, like disrupting the kind of welfare of other tenants, disrupting the well-being of other tenants, damaging the unit, so on and so forth. This bill would potentially, as written today, create a very significant loophole by saying you can evict somebody who has relapsed once you've met the condition of trying to attempt a, quote, warm handoff to another type of housing. And I think for those of us that have worked within systems, we know that there isn't really a clear agreed upon definition of what a warm handoff really means and like what that entails. I think there's another concern that some advocates have raised that some communities may try to pivot the majority of their system to be focused on recovery housing and away from kind of harm reduction focused interventions, away from traditionally how we think of housing first interventions, which again the data, the research all tells us that when it comes to getting people into housing, keeping them in housing, housing first continues to be the gold standard there. So those are the concerns that hopefully we'll see ironed out in the coming months. Next slide, please. The next bill I want to talk about is AB 1708 from Assemblymember Solace, who represents some of the southeast cities of Los Angeles County. It's sponsored by Cal Cities, formerly known as the League of Cities. This bill is really about how can smaller cities participate in accessing the HAP program. It started as a requirement for continuums of care to grant HAP dollars to smaller cities, without necessarily specificity on like how much of their money, how many grants, etc. As you all may know, HAP currently goes to counties, continuums of care, and the 14 biggest cities. The bill, after some pushback, has evolved to now instead require, during the HAP planning process, a comprehensive analysis of all the efforts small cities are undertaking around homelessness and an analysis of how state and federal funds can support those efforts, along with helping them identify funds. So I think there are some positives to this bill, right? It includes bringing more players into the conversation. Small cities are often on the front lines of addressing homelessness and don't necessarily have the connections to the services they need to ensure that they're routing people the right way. But there's some downsides, I think, that advocates have been raising as well, right? This significantly increases administrative burden on a program that's already very burdensome for locals to administer. It also raises the question of if this succeeds in channeling more HAP dollars away from counties and continuums of care towards smaller cities. Are those dollars are we adding a new layer of administration before the dollars hit the street? Are we then going to see communities do worse on their accountability measures because those dollars are going to entities that don't have the same kind of capacity to administer homeless programs? And then lastly, are we concerned about balkanizing resources among so many cities that we don't get the economies of scale we get sometimes from regional efforts, right? When you run a rapid rehousing program, for example, if you cut it up among a zillion different cities, you might just have dollars for rental assistance. When you do it at the regional level, you can kind of leverage that larger collective effort and ensure that a program has case managers, housing navigators, in addition to the rental assistance, things that ultimately make a program sing, make a program work. So do we lose that if we see HAP start to get cut up among many players? Do we see it go the way of PLHA funding, for example, which I think we have not seen a huge collective impact from some of those programs. Next slide. I suppose I said I'm not going to introduce my thoughts on these bills, but you can probably divine them without much effort. Next slide, please. AB 1899. Thank you. This is from Assemblymember Jessica Colosa, who represents parts of Northeast Los Angeles. It's sponsored by one of our very own advisory committee members, Javon from the California Coalition for Youth. So maybe in the discussion portion, you can share more about this. Also sponsored by Inner City Law Center in Los Angeles. The purpose of this bill is really to develop goals to get to functional zero on youth homelessness and lead to greater coordination on youth homelessness across agencies. And the way they would do that is by creating an Office of Youth Homelessness within the Interagency Council. Some concerns that I have heard is, while youth are their own special subpopulation, they have best practices associated with them that we need to consider. Are there concerns about losing coordination, right? When you create your own office, and do you lose any of the access to the full suite of resources of HCD, of Cal ICH when you kind of bifurcate into a new office? Next slide, please. A somewhat related bill, AB 1924 from Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who's in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. This is also sponsored by Inner City Law Center, along with All Home and Destination Home. This is a bill that would require a statewide homeless prevention strategy that brings in really all of the departments that address homelessness, but also a lot of the departments that touch people before they become homeless, right? It recognizes that many of these other systems, whether it's our carceral system, our healthcare system, our child welfare system, they see folks in crisis before it becomes that full-blown crisis of homelessness. And ultimately, it's the homeless system that already sees people once that crisis has just spun out of control. What if we could ameliorate some of those crises further upstream? So the bill's requiring a range of state agencies to come together, identify what they're doing on homelessness, identify the gaps, and come up with recommendations for how to close those gaps. I think the area highlighted here in the slide is, how do we make sure this isn't redundant with some of what we've seen from Cal ICH's action plan? How do we make sure there's enforcement mechanisms, right? It's one thing to tell a state agency to do something. It's another thing to ensure that it actually happens and is properly resourced. And as we know, it's a budget deficit, probably for the next couple of years. So it's going to be challenging to really properly resource these efforts. Next slide, please. This is a bill that, again, I think is really about data. It's really about kind of making sure cities are showing their work. Coming from Assemblymember Mia Bonta of the Bay Area, sponsored by Dignity Moves, and I believe the Bay Area Council. This is a bill seeking to have all cities, through their annual performance reports, which is part of the housing element, through those annual reports, start to report about what are they doing on homelessness. And so it kind of mirrors some of what the federal government asks from people in their homeless counts. The homeless count rate has two components. It has the count where we count people, and then it has the housing inventory count where we count resources. So this mirrors some of what the language in the housing inventory count, but at a city by city level rather than a COC by COC level, and is asking local cities to start reporting on what do you got when it comes to PSH, when it comes to other affordable housing programs, and then what do you got on the shelter side? Although it's limited really to non-congregate interventions here. So there are concerns about, again, is this going to cause a rush of cities trying to seek data from continuums of care, and do they really have the administrative capacity to deliver on that, on these asks? We're in the home stretch here. A similar bill, next slide please, SB 866 from Senator Catherine Blakespear, representing the San Diego County and Orange County coastal cities. I think we might have skipped a slide here. If we can go back to 866, please. Thank you. Whoop. We'll get there. SB 866, yep, there we go. Slide. Thank you so much. So loose trigger on that, on those slides. So SB 866 from Senator Blakespear. This is a bill, again, asking cities to more explicitly kind of plan for homelessness in their housing elements, and requires them to do kind of an assessment of what is the extent to which both sheltered and unsheltered homelessness is appearing in your city, and start identifying some of the needs within your city. So again, this is really about data, lifting up the data, and the same kind of pushback a little bit of like, we're asking for a lot more data, but we're not actually resourcing communities to sometimes provide that data. So that was some of the push and pull we heard in committee hearings on this bill. And then the last one I wanted to highlight, this is a tax bill. AB 1606 from Assemblymember Stephanie Nguyen from the Sacramento suburbs, places like Elk Grove. This bill mirrors a policy idea put forward by the Cicero Institute, which is a right-wing think tank that has shaped the homeless policy of the current federal administration and has shaped their thinking on moving funding away from permanent housing and incentivizing more coercion, incentivizing more criminalization. So what the policy actually is a tax incentive to businesses that play some role in removing people's property from their property, and essentially gives them a tax break for cleanup expenses um, as well as security measures that they may be taking, whether it's fencing, cameras, that kind of stuff, up to $20,000 per year. So the proponents of this bill, I think, have understandably pointed out that small businesses, many businesses are having to deal with costs associated with homelessness, and they really have no recourse for recovering those costs outside of insurance claims. Opponents of this bill have argued that one, again, Cicero Institute has very explicitly said that the purpose of this policy is to incentivize more criminalization-based measures that are focused not on housing and services, but on taking away people's things, and arresting them. There's a concern that as tax receipts, as there's tax returns that require money to go out to businesses, this is inevitably going to put pressure on the budget and move money away from proven solutions like housing and services. And I think there's also a concern of incentivizing really charged interactions between people experiencing homelessness and business owners who now have a financial incentive to, like, whether it's a vacant lot or some property they own, to push them out and dispose of their things, when really those are interactions that should be handled by trained outreach workers, people who are trained in trauma-informed care, and understand how to de-escalate and not escalate a situation. So thank you. I appreciate Cal ICH staff for letting me opine on this bill, because I was deeply concerned to see this coming from a Sacramento Democrat. But so that's kind of, there's a bunch of bills I didn't talk about. That's the kind of quick high level to give you like a little bit of the flavor of what the conversation looks like in the legislature. I just want to open it up to the rest of the committee. I mean, if you are following the legislature, how are you seeing the conversation? Do you have sort of feedback for the administration on any of these bills that we want to share now? And then I have a couple other questions once we've kind of covered that. So how are you seeing the conversation, and what's your kind of feedback for the administration on how to weigh in here? Yeah, Alejandro, jump on in, and then Alicia.
Hi, sorry about that. I was trying to look for the mute button. Like having my own, like being a lived experience advisory board member, this is a conversation that comes up often of these bills in our meetings, but also like in my personal life as an advocate in the work that I do in homeless services. And there is a conversation that was started with the other body, a conversation about homelessness and about addressing the myths and the false narratives that are spread about the way that homeless services should be addressed or funded. And a large part of that conversation that the lived experience advisory board members had was like ensuring that the state can create a better narrative or culture around the point in time count and around tracking, so that we can use like full numbers, like correct numbers, and look at all these things, because we're all aware of the myths that like people pass around, like, oh, everybody's from out of state, they're not from here, or people choose to be homeless, or the youth just got mad with their mom or their dad and they ran away, and all these myths that we are aware, because we deal with this work firsthand. The data shows otherwise. And so like having the ability to create a culture that humanizes that, but also is like based in evidence. Because if that were true, then we would want the most accurate possible numbers for every jurisdiction that there is within the capacity, so that if that is true, then it's addressed, but it's not. And so using that as a way to create a more humanizing campaign, I believe is a really huge thing that like can start. Like I know that's a huge undertaking and that's long term years. Like I know the mental health um anti-stigma campaign took a really long time, but I really like to hear about all these updates that are going on just because I can't keep up to date constantly because I work more on the local level than the state level or the federal level. But that is a conversation that the League has had and is very interested in. So I will be like letting them know the updates that are being brought here to this body, to the other lead members as well. Mary is also on. I don't know if she has any opinions on this, but I do like to hear about this and hear everybody's thoughts. Just because again, using the statistics that we have and the numbers that we have would really assist in like creating a talking point and a culture of like addressing the services and addressing homelessness as a whole in a way that's facts based and debunks all the myths and the other narratives that are going around that we know aren't particular true.
Thanks, Alejandro. I think you raise a really important point of just how we spend a lot of time in our communities with community members, right? Everyday residents trying to debunk myths and show them what we're actually talking about here, that we're talking about human beings here that all have complex stories, complex lives. We still need to do that work with our policymakers too, and ensure that, just because the data is out there doesn't mean they know the data. Just because the right narrative, the right story is out there doesn't mean someone's connected the dots for them.
Yeah, and that was brought up a lot. Was a lot of politicians statewide say that there are services or say there are resources when trying to do like catman enclosures or sweeps or whatever the case is, but aren't really fully tapped into what services are in their local area and what's actually possible. So
Absolutely. Yeah, committee member Wilkes, did you want to chime in?
Yes. One, just appreciate your leadership, Alex, and being on the front lines, as well as Roxanne. And appreciation to Megan for showing up and telling the story of the agency right now is really important. So that one, even though people are going to twist what they're going to twist, but the truth is being told. And, speaking to what Alejandro brought up, we understand that the numbers really need more light. When it comes to the Bill AB 1899, it would allow for admin to meet the intent of SB 918 and the resources and have the resources so that staffing can do what is necessary. This is something that has happened in Washington, and they've seen a 40% decline. And when we talk about declines in the state of California, we have to acknowledge the fact that our point in time count, youth numbers do not coincide with the homelessness data integration system, which is state data count, which is over 3 times. And then you have the California Department of Education, which those numbers for youth experiencing homelessness is 250,000. So when it comes to really addressing youth homelessness, considering we have too many of our adult population that have experienced homelessness as a youth. And so, again, appreciation to Alejandro for speaking to breaking the myths. The best way to break the myth is we're all human, and every human deserves the dignity to live a complete and full life, to reach their full potential here in America, where we have known and heard about the American dream. And so with that, just appreciate all the work that's happening. Following it, Alex, is a lot because you have the different perspectives, but uplifting the fact that, these perspectives do add, some hopeful clarity to the complexity that we're going to be dealing with as even the agency is going through a transition and the state have gone through several transitions. Also what we're looking to hear forward when it comes to a new administration. So just appreciate the fact that this advisory committee is still moving forward. Again, appreciate your leadership, Alex and Roxanne, and just looking forward to continuing the conversations, whether we agree or not agree, but sitting at the table and being with one another is pivotal, because heart to heart, we know that we have a huge opportunity to address, and how we get there requires all of us.
Thanks, Javon. Yeah, Alicia, did you want to chime in?
Well, how do you follow that? Like, I have boring things to say, not about lived experience or the validity of like why we need to be having these conversations here and like talking about the actual real things. I was going to talk more about the actual bills themselves and a little bit of the things that the Coalition for Rural Housing is tracking and vibing, but I want to be aware of time. And I also I don't know how I can follow up with that.
We have time, so please.
We need that too.
Go
We
for it.
need that too.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Well, I hope you can handle Alex and me. It can be a lot between all of us. Oops, that is not what I meant to do. I'm going to go ahead and drop for this. And this is a public link. This is where you can see specifically the bills that the Coalition for Rural Housing has been tracking, where we're support like co-sponsors, where our oppositions are. Also, if you are interested in like sharing or reaching out to let me know a little bit more about if there's a place where you think a farm worker, or a tribal perspective would be particularly helpful, we do run all of our positions through a full board committee, and that committee is made up of coalition members. So we tend to focus a little bit more on the development and the finance side and some of the preservation, and not as much on some of the services pieces. Okay, that should take you there. If it does not open, please let me know, because every time I click on this link, it takes me to my private link. So let me know if you can't get to it. If not, I'll try to post again. But I think one of the things I was commenting on is the general feeling of things that are happening right now. And I'm participating in certain federal advocacy as it relates to COCs and whatnot, but also USDA and HUD and all of these other programs. And we are all kind of bracing for these impacts that we know are coming down the line to our economy, we know folks on the ground know, if anyone who's gone to a grocery store lately knows already where that this is coming. But for folks who are tracking the finance and the cost of housing as solutions, we've already been pushing for over a decade on this idea that somehow you can put a cost on a human life in housing, right? But that's what they do, and that's what our legislators do all of the time. But this focus has been on unit production and cost containment. And the cost containment is always put on to the folks who are trying to get the housing to happen. It's either the jurisdictions and the folks who are either providing and running and operating the services, or the developers, right? And so we design the programs and we say we need to cut the costs. And right now we're about to see costs go through the roof, specifically the supplies we need. We saw it happen a little bit with COVID, and that's what's coming down the line. And so this idea that somehow we're going to continue to cut the costs of the housing and the services while all of the other costs are rising, and that it will continue to be on the shoulders and the burden of the folks trying to solve for it, to find the resources to do it. I haven't seen that switching, and I've found actually that our GEMs, especially at the state, even with our California GEMs, are leaning more towards market solutions. Right? So it's about the supply. It's about the streamlining. If you want services, you need to show me how to scale. And we know for a lot of reasons why that doesn't land, why it doesn't work. CCRH in particular knows that we don't need 250 units of housing. We only need 40 units, and they don't all necessarily need to be permanent supportive to address our housing needs. We'll never scale right to that efficiency that often is being talked about. And so I'm just commenting on a point in time when we know the crisis is worse, when we know that inequality and wealth inequality is worse than it's been, when there is this massive movement around it, people are upset. People are like burning like warehouses down. Our own folks who are here to try to help, are looking to us to solve it and to find the dollars. And so I'm just saying that when it comes to some of these pieces, really lifting up why it matters and that the dollars aren't necessarily the piece that we can always argue behind. And so I think there's a lot for folks who can speak to this in a different place. I do not like financing numbers, how much it costs. It will always be more affordable and a better investment to house people. So I am curious how we've and you all have taken what is always a finance and funding kind of conversation, and it's been pushed consistently and further around that funding finance piece when we know that these things are changing. And that's where I'm finding myself. And it's also a year where we don't have any money in the budget, so they want to run all studies, right? We want data. If we can't actually do the program, can you give us a study? But that also costs money. And so I'm just sitting and wondering about what we can do in this space, as Cal ICH Advisory Committee, how we can help each other and our partners who are in the policy places like Alex and myself and those of you on the front lines to continue to lift up and shift that if production and cost containment is the only thing we have to aim for, that is going to be a lot more challenging now. Is that too many words? I told you, Alex. Alex, you knew what you were signing up for when you invited me to speak. I think some of the other folks didn't, but that's kind of this big piece that I'm sitting with and I'm curious about.
No, yeah, I think that that's a really important point you raise, especially around we're hearing the legislature talk a lot about the cost of housing and the cost to build housing, which is important. We need to do what we can to control costs, but they're also using it as a way to say, and this is why we should not invest in permanent housing sometimes. And this is why I think they're sometimes turning to interim solutions, which, we know interim is can be a key part of a community's response. But if you don't put in the housing on the back end, people just get stuck there and interim is not necessarily always cheaper. And I think folks are also losing the plot a little bit because they hear permanent housing as a solution to homelessness and they think we need to build from the ground up a new permanent supportive housing unit for every person. And I don't think our legislators understand the role that rental subsidies play, the role that case managers play in sometimes rehousing people for much, much cheaper than either building a new unit or anyway, I digress. So a lot of important points there. Yeah, Mr. Garrett from CC.
Sorry to interrupt you, Justin, but before you comment, just for the good of the group and for those in public attendance, sometimes we in urban settings forget how much of California is rural, and why having folks like Alicia on the advisory committee and having tribal representation on the advisory committee is so important. I think, and Garrett can correct me, I think CSAC's number is 20. Definitions vary a little bit on what qualifies as rural, but I think CSAC has 28 counties that I know others have expanded the definition to be 40 counties. All of that to say there's a significant portion of our state that is considered rural. And housing and homelessness solutions are all going to look a little different in those communities. So thank you, Alicia.
Justin, you'll have to be fiery and passionate since you're sitting for a Graham. So
I'll do my best. First, acknowledge Megan's CSAC knowledge there on the number of rural counties in the rural caucus. And so that does mean that, that CSAC's board of directors is nearly half rural, and so it's a really important perspective for the work that we do. And just thank you for the opportunity to join this call today on Graham's behalf. I really appreciated, Alex, your opening comments, because the way you framed this time with homelessness funding and policy is really consistent with how CSAC's been talking about things as well. I think with HAP Round 5 and increasing the collaboration, the joint applications, further defining roles and responsibilities, we all collectively made some fundamental changes that are working. We're seeing it working. And, you know, in this time of significant threats and funding threats to overall safety net programs, you know, how do we sustain these investments in these programs in a way that's doable when there's other risks? So what I would add to your initial comments is just, you know, what's coming with HR 1. Counties have collectively looked at the impacts and are seeing, you know, cost shifts and cost impacts of up to $9.5 billion annually for counties statewide at full implementation. And, you know, we certainly have a budget request related to this to sustain health and human services programs, but, you know, that's going to have impacts on homelessness. So to the extent that, you know, counties aren't able to sustain HHS programs at the same level because of, you know, the federal cuts and cost shifts and, you know, maybe not sufficient funding from the state, you know, that's going to have direct impacts. To the extent that counties have to redirect, you know, local county funding to try to support these programs as much as possible, you know, that could threaten county investments in homelessness services and other priorities. And so it's all interrelated. And so that's the big framing we're thinking about in our engagement on homelessness efforts this year at both the state budget level and then some of the legislation that was identified here, you know, particularly with HAP and Round 7 and hopefully future ongoing funding, is just wanting that to be implemented in a way that, you know, doesn't have a whole new series of burdensome requirements, finding that balance between accountability and urgently getting this funding out into our communities. And so as we look at some of the legislation, same type of thing, right? What's the way that these ideas can be implemented in a manner that's not going to slow things down, but that can also improve things and make sure there's adequate resources for. So that's just, you know, not commenting on any bill specifically, but just overall how we're engaging on advocacy on homelessness this year and its connection to our broader safety net efforts.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think in part our role is to help advise the interagency council. And I think they have a really important role in weighing in with the legislature. It's not always an easy conversation, right? They are by definition meant to kind of have tension with each other. But there is just such a deep well of expertise that Megan and her team have that we want to make sure the legislature is benefiting from. So would love to hear from folks for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll transition to public comment about kind of what do we want to see from Cal ICH moving forward as we start to think about a new administration, a new legislature next year. What do we want our Cal ICH friends to leave that next administration with, thinking about, hey, here's what your legislature really needs to learn from you. Here's the ways you need to weigh in.
If I can just add to that, this action plan that we have that will be wrapping up in 2027 will be the first time Cal ICH has met its statutory mandate of providing recommendations to the legislature holistically, right? Like there have been opportunities on a program by program basis, but this will be the first time that we will meet the intent of original statutory language, which we're very excited about. We're also, as we think about, you know, what we want to offer to members, I will say that we have this last year really intentionally focused on developing relationships across the legislature, you know, Democrats and Republicans alike, to avail ourselves to provide, you know, one-on-one education. I was going to thank you, Alicia, for lifting up the tribal homelessness policy brief is a great example of that. We met with several members of the legislature independently to share with them the takeaways of the policy brief. And you know, there's our statewide association, certainly CSAC has, you know, member education days. I know as a previous member of the California Health Executive Association of California, CHEAC, we had opportunities to meet with members of the legislature to inform them on priorities of public health departments and jurisdictions across California. We don't have something like that in a statewide collection way for homeless county homeless service directors, city departments. It's been very disjointed. National Alliance has taken on a tremendous role in that space. Corporation for Supportive Housing, Housing California, but having a united group to inform, offer those education and informational sessions to members in a coordinated way is something that we're very excited to start looking for opportunities for Cal ICH to support that. So just some food for thought as you're thinking about how else Cal ICH can sort of continue to engage with our state elected officials. And just so that I'm not accused of favoritism, I only know so much about CSAC because before this appointment, I was in county government for almost 20 years. And so shout out to counties, but CSAC continues to be the example that I lift up. So.
Well, any other thoughts, fellow committee members? Now is our moment to wax poetic before we take the slings and arrows of the public. Okay, with that, I will pass the baton back to Claire.
Great, thank you. Megan, I just want to check to make sure you have nothing else you'd like to add before I move on to public comment.
No, I think we're good. Thank you, Claire.
Great. All right. So we will now accept general public comment. We welcome all comments and feedback. Due to the structure of this public meeting, we may not be able to respond to any questions. If you have any questions for Cal ICH or the committee, please email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov. In the past, everyone had 2 minutes for their general public comment. However, given the number of persons with lived expertise providing comment, everyone will now be offered 3 minutes. A Cal ICH staff member will soon share their screen with a 3-minute countdown timer, and we will warn you when your time has expired. If you are connected through Zoom, please select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer. And for those joining by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. Once I call on you to speak, you'll be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself. I will now check for raised hands. Okay. You. All right. And apologies if I mispronounce your name. I've got Marjiki Melman.
Hi, that's Marika Melman.
Marika, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'm here on behalf of the California Commission on Aging, and we are convening a hearing in June on supportive housing for older adults and how to better support the transition from homelessness for older adults and also prevent the transition to homelessness. And I wanted to invite the council and the advisory committee and the public to this event. It's on June 11th. It's local. It's at the California Endowment. You can find the information on our website, which is ccoa.ca.gov. CCOA stands for California Commission on Aging. And I also wanted to make a connection with somebody on the council. I don't know if that would be Megan, but somebody who has expertise in the area of older adult homelessness and the types of supportive housing accessibility that people in this group need. And I would like to have a conversation with somebody on the council just to make sure that we are covering all the ground that we should be covering at this informational hearing. So I don't know how best to do that.
If you want to reach out to that email address, and then we'll be sure to get you connected.
Okay, what was it? Cal ICH at
bcsh.ca.gov.
CSH. Okay, got it. I will do that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. All right. Phoebe Bell.
Hi, thanks. Just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Phoebe Bell. I am the newly created position of the Director of Housing Solutions for the California Mental Health Services Authority, and really appreciated the conversation today. And just want to flag kind of a growing interest and energy in the public behavioral health system to build stronger connectivity and partnerships with all of you doing such great work in housing and homelessness. I think when we talk about sort of the movement towards coercive solutions around homelessness, a lot of that is playing out in the behavioral health space. When we think about the impacts of HR1, there's many, but one of them is, as so much homelessness and housing resources are being tied to healthcare status and Medi-Cal in specific, the risks there of destabilizing newly created systems, all the pieces. There's so many intersection places, and just want to introduce myself and say Cal Mesa and myself are here to try to help build those bridges and find those mutual grounds where we can partner together to address some of these really critical issues. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Reba Stevens.
Good afternoon, and thank you. As California implements the Behavioral Health Service Act, how is Cal ICH thinking about aligning homeless prevention and housing strategies with behavioral health transformation, especially for people with serious mental illness, substance use needs, and co-occurring conditions? And I'd also be interested in knowing whether or not that is being tracked by this body, because there is the housing component that's there. And right now here in Los Angeles County, I know that there are several who will be, I shouldn't say several, there are many, who will lose their housing, time limited subsidies, and or the emergency housing vouchers, which is critically important to me, that is something that is being addressed. And so I just hope that that is something that what I'm raising really hits you, because it is happening, and it's happening right now. And I think that it's also important to acknowledge what that does to an individual's mental and emotional health, that fear or those uncertainties that they're experiencing currently right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Reba. Okay, it appears we have no other hands raised at this time, so I will pass it back to Alex for final remarks and adjournment.
Thank you so much, Claire. And Roxanne, I don't know if you are still on or if you've been pulled into closed session. Does not look like she's still on, but I do want to highlight Reba's comment just now, right? We are less than 2 months away from the transition to BHSA. And I think there's a lot more opportunity as we ask folks at the local level to better integrate and coordinate resources between the behavioral health system and the homeless system and the housing system to ensure that we're seeing that collaboration modeled effectively by the state. And so would love to make sure that at our next meeting, we are getting some conversation around what's happening with the launch of BHSA, and can hear more about that. And of course, we'll also hopefully be able to talk more about kind of where things are at with the federal dollars and what the state is doing to respond, and how things kind of shook out in the budget and the extent to which the budget is really cementing the legacy of this administration. So I want to thank all my fellow committee members and again encourage you to reach out, encourage you to share what agenda items you want to see in this meeting. And with that, wanted to put forward and ask to see if anybody would like to put out a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Judge. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you again to all our committee members for your insights and comments during our meeting today. Our next committee meeting is on August 5th, 2026 at 2 p.m. I also want to thank the members of the public who have attended this meeting. We appreciate your interest in our work around homelessness. I know many of you who attend our meetings work to address homelessness either across the state or in your local communities, and we appreciate all of your efforts. We hope you will all listen to our council meeting on June 3rd, 2026 at 1 p.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned at 3:53 p.m. To receive up-to-date information on the council's activities, please sign up for the council's email list. There is a sign-up option on the council's webpage. We also encourage you to follow Cal ICH on social media programs, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you.